Hi, my name is Mathilde. I'm 23 and I'm passionate about environmental science, sustainability, wildlife, the outdoors. And you can find me on my Instagram at sustainability chats. I'll link it in the description bar, and it's also in my general description of my YouTube channel. There's a link there if you're interested. I try to post daily about different topics related to these subjects, and I'll also make some stories sometimes to just kind of educate people about sustainability and also share the knowledge I acquired during my studies. So today we're going to be talking about the concept of the circular economy. So what is the circular economy? First, I have to give a bit of background. Originally, it was an idea conceptualized by Dame Ellen MacArthur. She was a British sailor, like a competitive sportswoman, and she would sail around the world for competitions. And she started to realize that how big of a problem plastic pollution was. But not only that, it made her think about all these resources that are being wasted, and what if somehow we could use those, repurpose this waste as a resource that we can then use to make something else instead of it just sitting there in the ocean or on a landfill. So, so the circular economy is essentially the idea that everything has a purpose, and it's kind of based on the ecosystem model. So in an ecosystem, in a forest, for example, let's say you have a squirrel. So the squirrel, it does its life, it eats, nuts, it'll bury them in the winter. But eventually it dies because, like anything alive, it'll die. But here, the squirrel decomposes. There's some insects that are going to eat part of that flesh. Then when it reaches a certain point, it's going to be more smaller creatures like worms and when its flesh and everything has become more smaller particles, and then it's going to be microbes that'll be breaking down that matter, because essentially every being is made of matter and energy. And so and that matter and energy is, long story short, going to end up back in the soil, and then eventually that is going to be used kind of as a fertilizer for, let's say, maybe plants that grow there, and then the cycle starts again. Maybe some of those plants are trees that grow, and then eventually a new squirrel comes in and eats those nuts, and the cycle of life, is closed and continues in a loop. So hence the circular idea. And so the idea of the circular economy would be to apply what we observe in ecosystems into our society. So let's take the example of a phone. You have a manufacturer who makes your iPhone, and then you as a consumer, you buy it. But then let's say after a certain amount of time, you break it, or it stops working correctly, or somehow it just is old and you don't really like its features anymore compared to the newer version of the iPhone. Then you're gonna get rid of that iPhone, and maybe it'll get recycled, but most likely it'll just be sent. A lot of its parts will just be sent in a landfill, and you get a new iPhone, and then the linear system continues because it's a line. It's manufacturer, consumer, landfill. And like I said, maybe part of it will be recycled, but truly a lot of things aren't actually recycled, just because a lot of times it's cheaper for whoever's in charge of the disposal to just dispose of it instead of recycling it. But in the circular economy, you would take those parts of the phone, and beforehand the manufacturer would have made it in a way that these parts would have the purpose of being reused. It's not something you would think about once the production has been made, once the consumer has bought the phone. Oh, now what do we do with these pieces? No, it would be from the point of view of the manufacturer. From the beginning, the parts of that phone would have been created with the intent of being reused. And even maybe the phone itself would have been created with the intent of being refurbished, and if something were broken to fixed, and so it could be used as long as possible. And there's actually a company in Europe called the Fairphone, I believe, and they create phones with the intent of them being refurbished. And so now take the example of the phone and imagine anything in your life, like your washing machine, your car, all these metals, all these parts would be created to be reused, to be repurposed. This part of the circular economy that I just discussed is the technological loop. But there'd also be the biological loop. So anything that is organic, meaning made of carbon in a certain form, so food waste, municipal waste, anything like that would also go through its own loop. So for example, if we go back to the linear economy example that we as a society have right now for the most part, so you have the producer, the farmer, whoever makes your food, and then that food goes to the consumer, and maybe in the process there's some waste that happens in the distribution of the food, and then you have the consumer, you eat your food, and then you throw out whatever you don't eat in the bin. All of that goes to landfill. And actually, according to a paper I was looking at earlier, actually my master's supervisor was one of the co-authors on that, but about 30% to 50% of municipal solid waste in developed countries is organic waste. So it just sits, all that food waste just sits in landfill, and a lot of it emits methane and all other greenhouse gases, and also some of that food contains some nutrients such as phosphorus, nitrogen, and other, elements or molecules that can be used as nutrients for plants. So that's where things like compost come in. Like a lot of households compost their food waste because then this food waste can be then used and go back into the agricultural system to grow more food. So essentially, the biological loop would be to take all that food waste, all that municipal waste that just sits in landfill and revalue it. Because also a concept of the circular economy is to take what you see as waste and relabel it, review it as resource. It's not waste if it contains such valuable nutrients and such valuable microbial communities that can be then used to grow more food. It's really a resource. It has value. And so essentially it would be to, here with the biological loop, it would be to revalue and re-input all of this lost resource into the system, instead of just having it sit there and potentially cause more pollution and aggravates, climate change, or maybe run off into groundwater and cause eutrophication, or, those things. So actually that's where my master's project comes in. I'm doing a project that kind of aims to fit in the puzzle of this solution that is the circular economy. So I'm looking to see what the nutrient efficiency of vermicompost is. So what is vermicompost? Well, you have vermi, which is worm, and compost, compost. So it's where you use a certain type of worm. So in this case, they're called red wigglers, and the scientific name is Eisenia fetida. And they are worms that usually live in the top layer of the soil, so they have direct access to whatever waste, or in this case, I guess since we're talking about circular economy, whatever resource, whatever food items and municipal waste you have left behind. Look at me saying waste again. It's a resource in this case. We're seeing it as a resource, but it's still, I don't know how to word it because that's, well, what we usually call it. And the wormwood feeds on that, the leftover food, whatever's put in the soil mixed with the soil, and its gut has a microbial community that is able to transform essentially that food, whatever's used as a feedstock for the worms, and then it poops it out, and essentially the worm poop is very valuable, and in some cases you can use it to grow more. Essentially, my master's project will be to see the nutrient efficiency of vermicompost. So the feedstock is the input, seeing how many nutrients are in there. Nutrients can include nitrogen, phosphorus, which are two of the big ones, and then you have micronutrients such as zinc, copper, magnesium, all things that plants need in a certain amount, and then to see how much of those nutrients would come out after the process where the worms eat that feedstock and poop it out, and then do different growth trials to see different kinds of feedstocks. So maybe one of these feedstocks would be food waste, another one would be municipal waste, seeing how much nutrients you can get out of these things through that process. And then actually I'm collaborating with another master's student, and he has a hydroponic system, which is a system whereby you have plants growing directly in water and you cycle nutrients through it. I'll make a video more on vermicompost and hydroponics and bring the two together to make a system called vermiponics. So here's the end of my video. It's already kind of long. I explained quite a few things, and I probably will make videos that kind of continue this topic, especially in the context of my master's. So I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, or if you know more about this and would like to share, feel free to post comments, links, and yeah, if you like this video and would like to see more like this one, you can subscribe, turn the notification bell on, and follow me at Sustainability Chats on Instagram. Thank you, bye, have a great day.